Hello, everyone. We're just going to give it a couple more minutes, see if we can get a few more stragglers to get logged in, and then we'll get started. So in the meantime, just a reminder that this is an interactive session. We're talking back and forth, so feel free to post those questions either in the LinkedIn or YouTube, wherever you're signed in, and we'll kind of go through this as we plow along through this. Also, we've got some downloadable material. JumpCloud's got their white paper on HR and IT implementation, so take a look at that. Some little light reading there. And we've also got our BYOD policy and checklist that you can brand yourself, and that's all in the downloadable links, so just check that out. Or you can get it by emailing hello@drlogic.com, and we'll send it over to you. So yeah, just gonna give it a couple minutes.
Yeah, and also just to say, this is two-way, so we're not just going to be transmitting information at you for the next hour. We have some stuff to cover and some information to give you, which you might find useful, but you're going to get much more out of this if you pop questions in. So we're really looking for some interaction. We're very happy to answer any questions that you've got in there as well. So it's definitely not one way, it's a two-way thing. So please use the chat. And any questions we don't get to during the presentation, we'll cover at the end. There's time for Q&A at the end as well.
Absolutely.
All right, I think let's do it.
Yes, we should get started. All right, well, let's get started. So hello, everyone. Thank you for being a part of our webinar today. My name is Matt Hotchkiss. I am the head of operations and business development for Dr. Logic, and joined to my left here with the man, the myth, the legend, Rowan Marsalek, the MD here at Dr. Logic. I'm going to be moderating today's conversation and trying to get you guys' questions in as they come along as well. So again, use the question section in LinkedIn and YouTube so that we can have a two-way dialogue and talk back and forth, because that's how we're going to get the most out of this session. So we just don't want to be talking at you the entire time. So as I've introduced Roman here, we've also got online with us today the infamous Tom Bridge from JumpCloud, joining us all the way from the USA. So thank you, Tom. I know it's early there, and you've had to pull some favors to get your partner to take the kids to school. So the school run. So thank you for doing that. Today's webinar, just to reiterate what we're talking about, is going to be is titled Onboarding and Offboarding and Why It Doesn't Need to Be a Pain, which is a topic that's near and dear to most of us in operations and HR and all the other associated core business functions in there. So to get everybody up to speed kind of on the relationship between Dr. Logic and JumpCloud, it's been about, what, 5 years now? About 5 years we signed the service agreement with them. And we currently use it internally to manage a lot of different things. And I think we have roughly about 2,000 users on it as we're using it as well throughout all our different clients. So we're obviously very pro JumpCloud. It's a tremendous platform. Tom's going to get into that. It does all kinds of really cool stuff, from managing a centralized cloud directory, SSO, MFA, admin automation, lots of really cool stuff. But today, we're going to be focused on how JumpCloud's features help take the pain out of onboarding and offboarding. Yeah. So, and again, not a one-way conversation. So start getting those questions coming in. I'm going to be looking to my right here. So you're going to see me kind of going back and forth between the monitors so I can see those questions. But yeah, so Tom, Roman, thank you. Two experts in the field here. Why don't we get started? And you guys take a couple minutes to kind of maybe introduce yourselves a little bit about yourselves, about what you do. And why don't we start with you, Roman?
Sure. So I'm Roman Marsalek. I'm the MD and founder of Dr. Logic, and I founded it about 20 years ago now. It's a Apple-focused MSP, so we're providing support and consulting services for Mac-based companies, most of whom are based in London. I've had a long journey with Apple. I started using Apples in the mid-'80s with a Apple IIe and then an Apple Mac Plus, and then on from there. And I used to be a developer before, and then I switched to usability. And after having lost my job in the first internet bubble in 2001, didn't have a job, didn't know what to do. And having done technical stuff and usability and design and been using Macs, I just fell into it. So in 2001 I started, and then 2003 set up the limited company. But I mean, it was home users cycling around London. I think I earned £200 in the first 3 months. I mean, it was pretty tight to begin with, and I was paying my rent on credit cards. But yeah, I think I'm an overnight success, 20 years in the making for sure. But these days, we've got about 40 odd clients. We've got a team of about 30 people, and we support various companies in various different sectors. Some are startups, very small, maybe just a few people. Our largest client's got over 1,000 users. So lots of different things going on in the company, but still doing the same kind of thing, just making sure that people and companies can get the most out of their technology.
So, Tom, kind of what's your role at JumpCloud, and how do you kind of fit in all of this? Because obviously we've been we've been working together for a long time. You and I met personally here, I think, for the first time, about 6 months ago now.
That's right. So hi, everybody. I'm Tom Bridge. I'm the principal product manager here at JumpCloud for Apple Technologies. And I spend my time working on our Apple platform, whether that's our mobile device management platform or our agent platform. I spend my time, building out management functions and functionality for the JumpCloud platform across all of our devices spaces. And so prior to joining JumpCloud about 18 months ago, I spent 15 years running an MSP here in the Washington, D.C. area. Much like Roman, you start kind of shoestring and you grew it like crazy. And so we grew our two-person practice from, 6 customers across 60 workstations when we started, all the way to more than 700 workstations with a team of 2. Across 60 customers, including some very large performing arts spaces here in the DC area. The Anthem, which is a 6,000 person nightclub, as well as 930 Club and Merriweather Post Pavilion. We spent our time working with tech-based businesses that focused on the Apple platform. Obviously, we did a fair amount of Windows support as well, but spent my career doing Apple device deployment for organizations large and small. And so now at JumpCloud, I'm building a future of that with our Open Directory platform.
Brilliant. I mean, that's one of the great things about Tom is having that similar experience, but now with JumpCloud, and it's just it's been a really, really great fit and been really helpful with us and our clients as we've been moving forward this as well. But well, why don't we just jump right into it then? Yeah. Sure. I mean, we got a couple of experts here. So why don't we start with you? Why is IT so pivotal to a positive onboarding or offboarding experience?
Sure. Good question.
Not prepared at all.
No. Well, the first thing is, I mean, again, if I look back to how things were 20 years ago, internet connections were so much slower. All the applications that you used were local, most of them on your own computer, and maybe there was a server as well doing stuff as well, but it was all very self-contained. These days, with the cloud, with much better connectivity, it's a lot more complex than it was then. But also, with that, there's so much more technology and there's so many more tools. And the things we have now in terms of open directories and device management, this all started a long time ago, but it's really matured now. So now is a great time to be leveraging technology and to be able to easily give access to all these different cloud platforms to all the users. So first thing is, it's much more complex now, but the tools are there as well. And so that is why IT is so pivotal. Without these tools, rather than being able to do an onboarding, which is mostly automated, you're going to be looking, if you look back, I mean, it could take several hours when this was done manually. You'd be downloading Adobe Creative Suite as it was then. You would, once downloaded, you'd be running all the updates, you'd be running the OS updates, you'd be setting all the settings manually, a long time ago. And you couldn't do it manually these days. And, for the smaller companies that are maybe hiring or onboarding 1 or 2 employees at a time, maybe once or twice a month, it's feasible that you can do it manually, but really, I mean, it's just a waste of time. And the other thing as well is you can't guarantee the consistency. And again, these days, because everything being more connected, it's really important that things are done properly from a security perspective. The other thing as well is sometimes you need to onboard very quickly. You have to sometimes onboard kind of after you should have onboarded. So, we may sometimes get someone saying that they've had someone starting that morning. We haven't had an opportunity to be notified beforehand. So sometimes it's after the fact, and you want to then make sure it's done as quickly as possible. So that can't be done manually. The other thing as well is you may then have an influx of employees. You may have 10, 15, 20, 50 people starting on the same day. And again, if you're going to do that manually, it's just not going to be feasible. As well as IT, it's also really important to take into account the other major department, which is HR. It's really important that HR has good communication with IT, so that IT is aware of when people are starting, what job they're doing, which department they're in, what they should have access to and what they shouldn't. And again, Tom will be talking about integrations later on with HR, but whether or not you have an integration, it is very important that HR keeps everyone else up to speed. If you've hired someone a month ago, it's not very useful to be telling someone the day before that they're starting or even on the day. So good onboarding needs to be quick. It needs to be easy to do. And these days it also needs to be remote. There's a lot of hybrid working, a lot of remote working. Some companies are fully remote. And the idea of having someone come to someone's house to then set up their machine manually just doesn't make any sense. And the first thing, especially with Apple, it's really important that you buy the product correctly first. You use your Apple customer number. You have it automatically enrolled into the Apple Business Manager, so that then all the device management, identity management can all flow out of that as well. And the other thing as well, from the user's perspective, they want to have their account set up. They want to have all their apps installed. They want everything configured correctly. And again, from IT's point of view and security, you want to make sure that everything is configured properly as well. So we want to make sure encryption's there. If someone then loses their laptop, we don't have to worry about whether there was any data on there that we have to worry about, because it's encrypted. We can then wipe it. We can lock it. No problem at all. The other thing as well, it's got to be 100% right every time. You know, we've got to make sure that the users are able to work from day one. We need to make sure that this process is documented, because although some of it is automated, there will be bits that aren't automated. We need to make sure that it's all done correctly. It has ramifications. If you're an external provider like us, it damages our reputation if we're not doing this properly. It gives a bad impression for the starter. So we need to make sure we're doing this properly every time. And again, technology really helps with that. As much as we can get automated, the better. The other thing as well is thinking about it from the employee's perspective. They have just started this job. It's their first day. They may be quite nervous. Also, they're wondering whether this was the right decision. And if they have a good experience, this is going to be a really good start. It's going to validate the decision they've made. It's going to make them feel like they've made the right choice in the right company. Obviously, if that's not the case and it's a bad impression, it really doesn't look good. And if you do a good onboarding, some surveys say that it can help retention up to 82%. So it's really important to make that first impression well. And it's not just about getting things set up properly. The other thing that we bear in mind is the fact that the user may be using technologies they've not been aware of before. It's important to do tech orientation, which we always do with users. At scale, it's not very feasible to do it one-on-one every time. So you can record videos with your knowledge base. You can put articles in there. You can have an internal email campaign which will drip feed information about IT and about the services over the first few weeks. So they don't get bombarded, but they're reminded regularly on what's available and how to use things as well. So the other benefit as well is if you do an onboarding thoroughly, you've got a proper tech onboarding as well, so that everyone knows what's going on. It's less likely that they're going to have issues, and those initial questions are going to be kept to a minimum. So that's why.
There we go. Well, listen, I think one of the key things you said there, I mean, it's tough enough when you're going into a new company. Like you said, it's your first day. We've all been there. You know, you don't know when to take a break. You don't want to take your lunch. You're trying to figure out where the coffee make. You know, all these different things are going through your head. And while we're focusing on the technology side of it, that is a really key part, because if that's all right, they don't have to worry about those stresses, and it just works, and we've got it right that first time, then that takes so much more pressure, which leads to that positive experience that you're talking about. So, you know, one of the things we talk about a lot, Tom, you know, I've talked a lot about personally, is just that friction between IT and HR in this whole process as well, because they have very different goals of the things that they need to have happen. And sometimes they don't feel like those things necessarily align. But JumpCloud, you know, you've taken some of that sting out of that, and you've worked around it. So what's your input on that?
Yeah, Roman mentioned it exactly. 82% of our customer, of people who have a bad experience while onboarding. I mean, that's the kind of danger that we're all in, right? As professionals, as organizations, you want to keep the people you hire. That's the whole point of hiring them in the first place, so that they can do great work for your company, do great work with your teams, and go from there. Having a great onboarding experience is all about connecting HR systems and IT systems so that it's one seamless whole that operates hand in glove. And, here, we're going to talk a little bit about Kazoo in just a minute, but I want to talk about what JumpCloud enables as an open directory platform. As JumpCloud, we want to work well together with our various, input partners. And so here I think about HRIS systems like Bamboo HR, like HiBob, like Personio. These are key systems for any organization that's just getting started. And so to be able to manage your employees directly from your HR system, have them input in directly into your IT systems through the open directory platform of JumpCloud, gives you the ability to, on their start date, activate their user at the right time. I mean, that simple task, taking that out of the, out of anybody's hands to manually flick somebody on to just essentially say, hey, Joe is starting on November 1st, and we want to make sure that Joe's account goes live at the right time so that Joe has a great first day, and that Joe has access to all of the things that Joe needs access to. You can add Joe to groups ahead of time. You can prepare Joe's machine to send to them. And Joe can, on the first day, open up a system, run through automated device enrollment, which is part of the Apple platform and the Apple story, tying together Apple Business Manager and JumpCloud. They will have a great first day because they can, get their credential directly, set their password on their first day, and then dive directly into the onboarding and enrollment experience within JumpCloud. So as an opportunity here, you've got a great opportunity as an HR professional, as a business owner, as a IT professional, to really streamline that process and make it just absolutely seamless so that everybody gets what they need to do on their first day. And they come away just gobsmacked with how ready to work your company was. And so that is a fantastic way to start the process. I do want to talk a little bit more about our partnership with Kazoo. They're a customer of ours in the UK. You've probably used their services before, but they're based on JumpCloud as well. And so they're using JumpCloud for device management, which means they can ship a laptop to any place one of their employees is starting. That employee pulls the device out of the shrink wrap. They've gotten a sealed box that came directly from Apple's supply chain. And when they open up the system, they're required to log in for the first time. That means that no one who is not an employee of the organization can use that system going forward, which is a really great way of making sure that your devices stay your devices and not belonging to anybody else, or that if they are taken, that what the thieves have taken is a very fancy brick. And so at that point, what you get is a really great onboarding experience that's branded with your company's logo, that is branded with their company's words and persona during that process. And then the device is set up out of the box. They only have to skip a bunch of steps that normally would be done manually by an IT pro. And then software is automatically delivered to the device. The user has a great first enrollment experience that results in them being ready to work on their first day. I talk a lot with my colleagues at various large Apple using devices, and one of their goals is that enrollment gets out of the way. Because really what you want to do is get this person engaged in the culture of the company. And whether that is participating in their onboarding training, participating in their onboard culture, engagement, you really want to make sure at that point that everybody has a really great experience in that line. And JumpCloud is key to doing that, because JumpCloud can be your single sign-on environment, which means when they go to the JumpCloud user portal, they can see their email, their key applications like Figma or Slack or G Suite or Microsoft's Office 365 suite. There are all sorts of things that you can do directly that way. And then as the, a business owner or the IT pro or the HR professional, you have a good confidence that the key policies that safeguard and secure your data on that device are in place from the moment that they have opened the lid. So, that's the really exciting part of JumpCloud, is that it takes it all away. So that at the end of the day, as Roman mentioned, the last thing you want your IT pro doing is unboxing computers and setting them up manually. There is so much time that is necessarily spent that way. And it's just not a great experience for end users. But as we look at this, and here I'll defer to the fine gentleman on the other side of this call, is the future of these kind of things. This is what's going to be expected, and if you don't have a way to deliver that, you need a way to deliver that, because this is what your employees are going to expect, and that's going to be really, really critical during your onboarding process.
Yeah. Just a reminder, guys, if you have any questions, please start sending them through, and I'll start feeding them to the guys here. Tom, you mentioned in there, you specifically said Bamboo. Now, this will work with multiple other, obviously, HR systems, or even if they don't necessarily have a bespoke HR system.
Right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. So, I was going to say, if you don't have an HR system, that's fine too. You can prepare users in JumpCloud well before they start. You can schedule them so that they're starting at a specific time on a specific day. And you can do this kind of manual user management one place and have it be effective across the entirety of your environment. What we want at JumpCloud is one password to rule all of your user experiences, whether that's logging into your desktop or logging into email or logging into your key applications throughout the business.
Okay. And with the clients that we have that are using it, I mean, what have you seen as far as the benefits? What are they saying back as far as the interface and how it's helped them out? I mean,
well, I mean, firstly, if you think about onboarding, and especially with a client who was doing it themselves beforehand, and even with us, it's hidden away from them, but the boring, tedious work is still there. If you imagine that, so for example, with our largest client, they've got over 200 apps that they need access to. And if you imagine an IT pro having to log into every single one of those portals, creating credentials, and then going to the next one, going to the next one, going to the next one, and then expecting that user to then be able to keep track of those 208 or whatever different passwords is very difficult. And the likelihood that they're going to reuse passwords or have to write them down somewhere unless you've got a password manager is quite high. But the benefits really, firstly, it's consistency. It means that it's done right every time, and that everyone has the right access to the right apps, because it's quite easy to do again in JumpCloud, because if you've got groups and those groups have access to those services, as soon as that person falls into that group, they've got access, and as soon as you pull them out, they don't. And also just speed, again, without having to go through the rigmarole of going through every single one of those different applications to give access, and being able to centrally control that is a massive time saver. And again, whether someone is outsourcing their IT, or especially if they're doing it themselves, where they actually can feel the pain, it just alleviates that massively. So really, that's the main benefit. I think the other thing as well, JumpCloud is a massive topic, and what we're talking about is onboarding and offboarding, but just in terms of security, there are so many other features in there as well. So some of the things that we use are conditional access. So if you're using like a secure web gateway service such as Zscaler, there's a set of known IP addresses. It means that we can ensure that only traffic from Zscaler, which is coming from a laptop company owned, is allowed to authenticate. We can block all that. So even, for example, if someone starts the first day and they're like, oh, well, I'm waiting for my laptop to arrive, but, I'm going to just try and do something somewhere else. Even if they wanted to, they couldn't. So, but yeah, it's just so much easier. And again, if we look back, device management used to be a hard sell. People didn't understand why you would bother doing device management. Now, if you look, for example, at Cyber Essentials, if you've got more than a few machines, it's impossible to get certified with Cyber Essentials, because there's no way that you can actually show that you can update all systems within 14 days. And in the same way, identity management is going the same way. Soon it's going to be pretty much impossible to actually administer all these different services manually. You're going to have something. That's why JumpCloud is, for us, it's already a given. It's very difficult to support companies that don't have some kind of directory in place.
Well, and the key here we're talking about is the user experience. But obviously, a benefit of this, as you were just touching on, here, is the fact that it's going to save so much time on the IT side, on the IT setup, on the HR setup, that there's going to be a huge cost savings for the company as well. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, you think about the amount of time that, you know, an IT professional charges. You know, if we think about that, there's 2,000 business hours in a year. If your user is spending, if your IT person is spending, you know, an hour to 2 hours per device per employee as they start, you know, that's a substantial amount of company time as they grow. And so if you're bringing on 100 people or churning through 150 people a year, I mean, that's a substantive part of their day where, you know, they would much rather be automating that away, because that's what allows them to focus on some of the long-term projects around, you know, posture management, SOC 2 compliance, all sorts of tools and things like that. ISO 27001 compliance is especially time consuming. And so you don't want your IT professional having to switch contexts all the time between deployment and the long-term thinking work that you're really paying them to do. So, you know, the fact that, you know, you can automate your automate your onboarding with JumpCloud is a great way to do that, so that end users get the experience that they want on day one without your admin having to dedicate hours of their life to deploying it.
Okay. Yeah, and that's another trend in IT. So it used to be the case that something breaks and you fix it, and that was basically IT. You just kind of keep things running. And again, with the move to the cloud, a lot of the administration or a lot of the maintenance back end, we don't have to worry about the infrastructure. We don't have to worry about the servers that Microsoft 365 runs on. Whereas before, when you had a small business box running Exchange in your server room, that was very much a concern. And if it went down, it was quite normal for a company to be without email for half a day because they couldn't get back up and running. So, you know, it's completely changed now. And with IT, it's really much more, you know, businesses are asking IT what value they deliver. And by automating the more menial tasks, it means that there is more time to focus on what the business wants and delivering against that. And that's really where IT is moving to now as a business enabler. We've got a question.
Yeah, well, so in terms of company size and using JumpCloud, so like we work with clients of varying sizes. We have enormous clients, we have smaller ones. Is there a kind of a threshold? The question we have is, a gentleman's asking, we're a relatively new startup with less than 20 people. Is this a type of automated onboarding? Is it complicated to set up?
Absolutely not. This is a really straightforward process, and it requires using standardized tools. So there's a very quick setup with our friends at Apple. They're going to assign you a customer number. If you're already buying machines directly from them, you probably already have what you need to get started here. Apple Business Manager is a really straightforward way of aligning new devices that you bought from Apple with JumpCloud. And so you connect the two of them with a very simple exchange of identity information. So you're going to download something from Apple and upload it to JumpCloud. And at the end, you'll be directly connected. There's a short form to fill out on our application that essentially says, hey, I want to turn off a couple of these features. I want to turn off the, I don't want you to ask everybody for location, information, or I don't want to ask anybody for these kinds of different pieces. You can really simplify your enrollment just by unticking a couple of boxes. And then at the conclusion of the process, you say, enable this user or enable this, device login feature in JumpCloud. And at the conclusion of that process, admins, you can customize that experience in a really straightforward fashion. You should be able to accomplish that within 4 hours of time. I mean, it's half a day of setup to get everything that you need to do in terms of your security profile, all of those pieces. Or, obviously working with somebody like Dr. Logic gives you the ability to essentially say, hey, that's their problem. And that's the best way to handle this particular situation, especially at that size. If you're not a technical person, that's totally fine. Our colleagues at Dr. Logic can take care of it.
Yeah, and the other thing so we looked at various different tools. About 6 years ago, we started researching, and we looked. There are other providers. There are things like Okta or Azure AD for doing identity, and there are other products for device management, just such as Jamf Pro. The thing that's really appealing about JumpCloud, first of all, is that the user experience has been thought of not just for the admins behind the scenes, but also the users. And that's to say that it is very easy relatively to set this up compared with other tools. You don't have to go on a 3-day training course to figure this out. But also the day-to-day activities that you then have to do are very, very simple. The user interface is really clean. Everything makes sense. It's where you think it would be. So really, yes. And rather than saying, where's it too complicated? I mean, it's a great opportunity to get in there early and get stuff set up right. Again, in this day and age, there is no minimum really. It's like, well, do I need to be 10 people before we start thinking about device management or identity management? Not at all. And it will still pay dividends at that scale. And also means that you're set up for growth. It means that when you start growing, because when you get to about 30, 40, 50, it starts to become very, very painful without something like this in place. So it's a great time. I mean, 20 is actually quite big. We have people who are coming. I mean, we use it all across the board, but even if you're 5 or 10 people, we'd still say it's a good idea. Absolutely.
So if you're 5 or 10 people, you're a small company, and you're not working with an MSP like Dr. Logic, or there are other MSPs available. Is it easy for the layperson to set something like this up?
Well, again, it's interesting because what we see often with startups is that there's going to be someone who's quite technical, and they're going to be the person who buys all the computers, sets up the router, sets up the Wi-Fi, signs up to all the different services and does that. So if you're technical, then there's no issue. And firstly, there's plenty of documentation. The documentation for JumpCloud is very good. It goes through step by step with setting up SSO connections with all the different services as well. And also you can get premium support. So you've got JumpCloud's help as well. But that's for people who have a technical kind of side to them. And even then, once they get to a certain size, they're just not going to have time to be dealing with that kind of stuff anyway. But if not, then you're either going to need to put in some work and read up a bit, or you're going to have to go and get some help from somewhere else. But it is still really quite simple. And if you had enough will, you can figure it out with not too much hassle anyway. But the resources are out there anyway. So if you're not technically minded and you're not really interested in doing that kind of stuff, and it's not really your focus, then you just use the resources to hand anyway. And, it's easy to do. Okay.
One of the things that I would say about that is that, as you're a new business, as you're working to get started, you want to spend as little as you can on extra people. And so working with an MSP is a great way to focus your endeavor as a business on your final goals without adding overhead. And so, working with an MSP like Dr. Logic is a great way to augment your abilities with, industry-leading technology without having to hire an expensive IT director early on.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the stumbling blocks as well. Is it might be looked as a kind of money saver to do it yourself, but if you think about it, with all due respect, you're a professional at what you do, and if you're then doing this IT stuff as an amateur, you're basically paying professional rates for an amateur to do the work, where you should be actually focusing on what you're doing. And the other thing that we find often when we're talking to startups is it's more about the things that they don't even know that they don't know. So if you've come onto the webinar today and you're now learning about identity provisioning and device management, you haven't heard about this before, and you didn't realize that you could have a system that will automatically set up your computers and automatically make sure that everyone's got access to everything with just one password and one portal, then that's going to be quite enlightening for you and quite exciting perhaps even. But that's just one aspect. I mean, there are so many other facets of IT and how it can help a business that you won't know about. And it's very nice for Matt to call us both experts, but we're only experts because we've been doing this for such a long time. So we've kind of seen it all. Very early on, we made the mistakes ourselves. And in fact, just this morning, I had a friend who was messaging me saying, I've bought a new laptop. I can't get it working on both devices. Unfortunately, he's got a 13-inch MacBook Pro with an M2 chip, which only supports one external display. And so he's just gone back to Apple and swapped it out with a 14-inch. But again, you just learn by experience and by doing this. And because we've onboarded lots of different clients and put this in place lots of different times, and we have lots of different onboarding processes for users in all these different companies, you learn by doing.
But we just had a question come through from Ramona, who's asked. So about the scalability of it. This isn't just necessarily for startups. I mean, you talked about Kazoo earlier. I mean, Kazoo is thousands of users. And she has a follow-up question. Is it a subscription-based model? So I'll let you guys deal with that in a second.
Yeah, so the question, so is this suitable for startups, or is it for bigger companies who are scaling, and is it subscription-based is the question. I mean, well, I can answer some of that. It's great for startups, and I would say, I mean, if you're a startup, the idea is you're going to be growing anyway. So again, you want to get the right stuff in place to begin with. It's not something that's designed for enterprise that you can kind of squeeze into startup. It is completely suitable for very small companies, even if they don't grow any bigger. And it scales with size because it's a per seat subscription. It means that when you're small, you pay a little amount. As you grow bigger, you pay more. And one of the things that's really good about JumpCloud compared with other systems is that it doesn't take a lot to set up. It's not like some other systems where you need, a professional services engagement over maybe several weeks, where you're putting together a scoping document and stuff. Once you get the tenant, you can jump straight in and start using it pretty much straight away. And also, if you've already got Google Workspace or Microsoft 365, you can sync that up. You can bring the users in. And then from that point on, JumpCloud can then control the authentication. So absolutely, as I said before, don't wait until you're a certain size. It's very good for small businesses as well, even if they never get bigger. But for startups, obviously, where growth is one of the objectives, it's even better because then you're set for growth.
Yeah, I was going to say traditionally we're meant for the small to medium enterprise, which means 50 to 5,000. And so depending on how big you are, I mean, that's the range that we tend to operate in. Obviously, if you're smaller than 50, this is still a great product. And it provides a huge amount of value for organizations that are just getting off the ground, especially if they want to have a unified platform for device management, user management, and participation with all of your individual applications. This is a great way to simplify what you need to do in order to onboard a new person.
We're talking about scalability here. I mean, you mentioned earlier Kazoo and their experience. So why don't you talk a little bit about that? Because that's a pretty amazing deal.
Yeah, we're thrilled to be partnered with Kazoo, handling their device management and some of their user management tasks as well. And so when a new Kazoo employee comes on, they get a machine drop shipped to them directly from IT. And when the user opens up the device, it's ready to go in Apple device, or excuse me, an automated device enrollment from Apple. And they enroll immediately in JumpCloud. And so the idea here is, you've got what you need to, handle the environment directly from the get-go. And so they get all of their software delivered directly through JumpCloud. They get all of their application management done through JumpCloud, so access to key systems. And that's all handled directly out of JumpCloud's interface. Their IT team needs to handle one interface for all of their key technology tasks, which avoids some of the, the mental churn of having to switch around between applications. Because when you're multitasking, if you're moving between different, concepts and different focus points, you're going to lose some of your mental productivity. It's going to sap some of your energy as an IT pro. They wanted a solution that was going to keep people in the same context all of the time. And so that was what their focus was in using JumpCloud as they scale out to thousands of users.
We've got another question. So, Ramon, you're asking, will it replace the purpose of an IT manager? And then, sorry to be so direct. Well, I would say, the thing is, JumpCloud is there to do directory and identity, identity and device management. And so it will do that, but someone's got to drive it. So you need someone with a certain level of technical ability to be able to drive it, and also to make decisions about how it's going to work as well. And also the question is, I guess, can you do with, an IT manager? Does that also mean that you have no, service desk? You have no one doing support? Obviously, the short answer is no. It's not going to replace an IT manager. And it's probably going to be the IT manager in the first place who's going to decide that JumpCloud is a good idea to put in place. But from compliance and security issues, and also thinking about continuous improvement, being aware of what trends there are, and making sure you're keeping up to date rather than getting left behind, making sure that you're keeping all the users efficient on the right platform. There's a lot to that, and JumpCloud's not going to replace that. JumpCloud's a piece of the puzzle, but you need someone who's looking after the overall picture, what we call our IT success pathway. It's like, well, what route is your business taking, and who is making sure that IT is there every step of the way supporting the business and its objectives? So no. But if you're just starting out and you don't happen to have hired an official IT person, if you put this in place before you then end up hiring them or engaging with an MSP, they should be very happy that you made the decision. But yeah, no, short answer is no. The long answer is no.
We've got another question that has just come through. Can you change the setup easily? What if we change how we onboard people and start to use different software? What about if someone is promoted or changes jobs, so they need access to different company systems? Can this be managed easily?
Really straightforward to manage this process. And so, for example, if I go from being a product manager to being an executive at JumpCloud, and I'm not spending my time in our code management system or our software development systems, but I'm spending more time with finance. If I switch user groups and applications are assigned to user groups, or specifically if my title changes in the HR system, I can have groups that are keyed off of that title information. And so that is an opportunity for you as an organization to have, applications. If I'm working in the engineering and product organization, and now I switch to working in the executive organization, I can change the software in a really straightforward way just by changing my title. So that at that point, the IT department is notified, hey, by the way, Tom's title is no longer principal product manager. So maybe take him out of the product group and maybe add him to the executive group because he's now, something executive. And so there are really straightforward pathways in JumpCloud to handle those kind of tasks. With regard to changing the different onboarding methods, at all times, you can change your onboarding process so that if you decide, hey, I really want to include the terms of address screen that's included in macOS 13 Ventura, you can include that screen. And so that it's just a matter of changing a couple of checkboxes in your environment, or updating what software is deployed to your automated device enrollment group, or changing what is actually executed in terms of policies on devices.
Okay. Yeah. We've had a great question come in that kind of along those same lines from Monica, and she's asking, she's saying, many of our hires are freelancers or contractors. What are the benefits of using JumpCloud for these types of job roles from an HR and IT perspective?
Sure. Where do you want to start? Roman, you want to go first?
Well, the thing is, freelancers and contractors are still going to be needing access to services and the right services. So just in the same way as what Tom was talking about in terms of changing role and then having access to different things, it will perform exactly the same function. The difference might be that with these people, they might be working from their own devices as opposed to company-owned devices. So the device management part of that may not be relevant, but in that case, as well as having the right technologies, you need to make sure that you've got a BYOD policy that they've signed up to. You're obviously giving them access to company data, and depending on which certification you've got, for example, ISO 27001, you'll have to run your risk assessment first of all anyway, and put all the mitigations in place. But once that's done, you can then also use JumpCloud's conditional access to, for example, limit how they can access this, where they can access it from. So for example, if you've got a freelancer that's only supposed to be working from the office, you can lock down access to the IP of the office, or again, if you're using Zscaler and so on. So you have the same challenges that you would have with an employee in terms of making sure that everything is set up properly so they can work as they need to, but also not have access to the data that they should have access to. The other thing as well that's really great about JumpCloud, again, as Tom said, is that you can schedule an offboarding. So if you know that you've got a freelancer working for a couple of weeks, you can schedule in advance that they lose access to things automatically, rather than someone having to remember and having a task. And that's prone to error. And obviously then you can end up with people continuing to have access to things that they shouldn't have access to.
Well, and I think that takes us to a really important topic, is that we've talked a lot about onboarding new users. We haven't talked about taking them away again or offboarding them. And so if I were to, win the lottery here in the States, I think Powerball's up to like $700 million. And my company wanted to offboard me in a straightforward fashion. They'd want to do that without having to go check every individual system, and log me out and then remove my user account. At JumpCloud, when you have a user depart, you can go ahead and simplify that process. That process can be just a matter of saying suspend this user. And that means don't delete any of their data, but just make them unavailable for now. And that's something that you can do with the click of a button in JumpCloud. It affects all of their ability to log into their device. It affects their ability to log into single sign-on applications. And it affects the ability for them to be able to access network resources that are key as well, whether that's file shares that are connected over Samba using JumpCloud Samba connector, or tools like on network storage. So you have all sorts of opportunities as an admin to basically just say, not right now. Suspend this user at this time. If you have an adversarial departure, it's really, really important that you be able to affect all of their key login systems with a single stroke, so that they call you into the Zoom conference and then ticky the box and all of your access is suspended. More than 20% of customers or companies out there say that they've had a problem with somebody on board, leaving their environment and still having access to key resources. And so it's really, really important to get offboarding right too, because that's what protects you as a company from data loss, from data migration to your competitors, from just access that's unauthorized after the departure of an end user. And so having a clean and easy way to do that from a single pane of glass across all of your applications, across their devices, all of those things, that's something that you want to have as an admin. And so as an IT pro, as a HR professional, as an executive, you want to make sure that your data is yours and not in the hands of somebody who's left the company. And JumpCloud allows you to do that in a really straightforward way. Whether that's an employee leaving or whether that's a contractor or freelancer, you have the ability to schedule their departure on a specific day at the conclusion of their arrangement.
I think that's really key, because as an MSP, we deal with this all the time, where, like you said, you hope that most offboardings are going to be amicable, but sometimes they're not. And you need to do that very quickly. You need to do it right now. So, I mean, a poor offboarding can cost businesses money, and, it can add security risk, but, you sometimes you need to make that cut quickly. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, again, just echoing what Tom said, because in JumpCloud, with a flick of a switch, you can suspend access immediately. It means that it's no longer a problem. Again, if we think back to before having JumpCloud in place, what would have happened is we would have been pre-warned normally that something might be going on. So what we then would do is we log into all the different systems, have all the different admin control panels up there, and when we got the nod, it'd be a race of going through each one and then changing stuff. And even then, it can take quite a while. And that's when you're pre-warned. If you've got a situation sometimes where a decision has been made in an instant, you're then on the back foot. So having something like this in place is awesome. But even when it's not adversarial, it's really important, again, just in the same reasons why onboarding using IT is really important as well. It's very complex now. There are lots of different systems, and it takes a lot of time. So again, rather than having something that's quite mundane and time-consuming, it can be much easier. The other thing as well is sometimes there'll be situations where people are going and then coming back. And again, this makes it even easier. So if someone's like on maternity or paternity leave, it's much easier to make sure that this is consistent. And also really important that when they come back, that they've now got access to all the systems they had before. Otherwise, they might be wondering, why have I not got access to this anymore? Are you planning something? But again, it's just about making it easy so that you don't have to worry about whether it's been done right. You know that people don't have access to the systems they got before, and you're not creating any security risks. There are other things as well. I mean, if people, some people like to take data with them. There are other tools that can be used in conjunction with JumpCloud in terms of data loss prevention. And also, JumpCloud has directory insights, which allows you to see exactly when the user is logging in and out to different systems. And it's feasible if you've got an inkling that something's going on, you can look at those directory insights and get a sense that maybe their behavior is changing. Actually, Tom, I don't know this, and this is something that we've only recently doing for our clients. So we now set up seams, which are places where we can collect logs and then we can analyze them for different patterns, security incidents, or whatever. Is it possible to feed the information from directory insights into a logging capture system like a seam to be able to then analyze that as well?
There are logging and capture systems that support JumpCloud's data feeds. Here at JumpCloud, we've got a couple of different data feeds that we can make available to you. Your directory insights are authentication informations. They're updates of individual systems. There are some other, focused directory-based tasks that are included in there. And in addition, we have our System Insights API as well, which reports a lot more detail about individual systems over time. There are ways to, extract that information directly from JumpCloud into a seam, but right now it's a formal pull, not a straight push.
Yeah, and so the point of that is that although you have this information in place, the good thing about taking it somewhere else and having something that is designed to spot patterns automatically. So you've got things like IBM QRadar, Splunk, Elastic Seam as well. Microsoft have their Sentinel, which I think is now Purview. But with these systems, you can then take the information that JumpCloud has collected and analyze them. So it's a bit more advanced, but in cases where you want to be able to have a heads up with a potential problem, these systems can automatically look for these patterns. So just something to consider.
Okay. Well, listen, guys, this is all brilliant stuff. I mean, it is a very complicated issue. I mean, there's a lot of things here with the onboarding, offboarding, from security to customers, the user happiness and all these different things we've been talking about. I mean, it really kind of boils down to the JumpCloud has taken all that and simplified it into a process that is very easily be manageable. It's very scalable, and if you're working with an MSP or somebody who can help you with that and get it set up right the first time, you can just pay huge dividends across the business. Yeah,
absolutely.
So, brilliant. Well, listen, I think we're getting waves over here from the directors or Jenny, we should say, that we're running out of time. So, if there are any other questions, do you have any questions that want to come through? Please send them through now, and we'll try to get those answered. Again, if we can't get them answered now, we will make sure that each one of them does get answered. We'll send you a message back on that. Yeah.
Yes, we've got a question. With conditional access, can you reserve access to company resources from only specified company-issued devices to prevent data being accessed from personal devices? Yes. So if you've got the JumpCloud agent, which is a bit of software that sits on the computer, you can then push a certificate onto that computer. And then with conditional access, you can say either allow or deny based on whether this certificate is there or not. The only caveat at the moment is if you put one of those rules in place, that's for either macOS, Windows, or Linux. It doesn't cover mobile devices yet. But if you're looking at restricting things to computer devices, you can also do it the other way around, and it depends on your security posture and your requirements. So, for example, you could say, if it's a company-owned device, then remove the need for MFA, unless there are some situations. You could say, well, if they're in the company office and they're on a company-issued laptop, then I'm going to lower my requirements because it's less likely that that's going to be the case. But yes, absolutely. And again, as I said before,
absolutely.
Yeah, if you've got if you've got like a VPN service with a static IP, or if you've got something like Zscaler or Cisco Umbrella, then what you can do is you can provide a list of IP addresses, which can also then be used for conditional access rules as well, which will accomplish the same thing.
Yeah, and as we expand into 2023 and beyond, obviously supporting mobile devices both in a BYO context and in a corporate-owned device context is going to be something that we support for conditional access. So look for us to grow and change. We're an agile company. We like to release all sorts of new stuff all the time. This week we've released JumpCloud Password Manager and also remote access. So there's all sorts of new features that are baked into the platform all the time.
Brilliant.
Yeah, and from outside of JumpCloud, very much repeat that sentiment. What's been really nice is to work with a company that is always looking to grow and always looking for opportunities to fill the gaps that we have as MSPs. And so we consistently see that new features are out. And also, JumpCloud is very interested in talking to customers and finding out what their needs are and developing based on that as well.
Well, guys, brilliant stuff. I think we're just about out of time. So I just want to say thank you, both of you guys, for taking the time today to have this conversation. And I want to thank everybody who's sent in questions and who's out there watching this right now. If you do have any questions, feel free to email them over to hello@drlogic.com, drlogic, one word, and we'll ensure that either Roman or Tom gets an answer off to you on those. If you'd like to be sent as well a link to JumpCloud's white paper on building a bridge between HR and IT, you can email that over to hello@drlogic as well, drlogic.com, pardon me, as well, and we'll get that. And we also have a bring your own device policy and employee checklist that you can rebrand with your company details and logo and all that stuff that you could use if that's something that would be helpful. Again, just email for that and we'd be glad to get that over to you. So any closing thoughts, guys, before we?
Well, I think just to summarize, JumpCloud, what it will do is it will simplify logins. For the most part, you just got one login to use. It will simplify setting up the computer and either adding or removing a user onto the computer and simplify offboarding. It just makes everything so much easier. I mean, it's a no-brainer.
Tom, anything?
I was going to say, open directory platforms are a great way to amplify your own business and to essentially provide everything under one roof and connect everything together, which is going to give you the tools that you need to advance your business rapidly without having to, hire a ton of people to manage your environment.
Brilliant. Well, listen, again, thank you, Tom. I know this was an early start for you again. Thank you for taking the time coming all the way over from the US to do this for us. And we look forward to seeing you soon and to working with you. And again, just want to thank everybody for tuning in and get those questions over and we will get you some answers.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, Tom.